I took a week off and I still have no introduction skills whatsoever. This video is about tight ends for 2021. Players that are definitely undervalued actually. Making great best ball targets. I've got a mix of a whole group of players I want to talk to you about. Also some thoughts about tight end in general and the New England tight end situation for 2021 while I work my 2021 projections. I'm tired of saying 2021 already. Everyone wants to over-exaggerate our ability to predict talent, which is funny, so it's not really something we can define in and of itself. But there are some indicators that have been remarkably useful. As the minute you stop thinking about tight end as different type of wide receiver and start realizing it has more in common with running back and especially quarterback in terms of breakouts and predicting usability in fantasy, it's almost been one of the most enjoyable positions for me in a while since I did any research on it. It was one of the first Twitter debacles or debates I actually got involved in, and it continues to be easy since then. At the time, it was Jimmy Graham is bad now because he's not in New Orleans. I'll point out he's had 3 top 12 seasons since leaving New Orleans, including on the Seahawks, who have no history, coaching history, quarterback history, or anything else of actually providing volume to tight ends. Again, the continuous signal seems to be and continues to be rather, that good players accrue volume, and anything else defining talent outside of that is somewhat speculative. And Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski are still proving that good players produce. Now, tight end in and of itself is more situation prone. We do see players walking around looking for their situations a little bit more than a wide receiver or a running back. But tight ends are such a smaller hit rate group in general, and there's same with their fantasy points, are much more prone to variability. For example, since 2009, around 29 running backs have hit for 2 top 12 seasons or more. Around 27-ish wide receivers have hit for 2 top 12 seasons or more since being drafted in 2009. For the first time and second time, I guess. 17 tight ends have hit in that time. Now, that's not it's not half, but it's at least 10 fewer players, like 2/3 of the grouping, just when you're looking at the players who have actually had top 12 seasons. And at tight end, we're not really interested in top 12 seasons, but it does make a remarkably good core for a streamable group, especially when you're thinking about best ball. And players who have had top 12 seasons, again, like with wide receiver and running back, do offer a higher hit rate group for those who are going to go on to have even more usability. Now, the players at tight end that prove that variability with the position include Delaney Walker, which if anyone's talking about Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and don't mention Delaney Walker, then I know, but they probably haven't done too much of their due diligence. But Delaney Walker is more akin to Darren Waller. Both were actually positional converts. Delaney Walker was actually virtually a fullback in San Francisco before he got to Tennessee and then produced multiple top 5 seasons. For example, Darren Waller, converted for wide receiver in Oakland, turned him into a top 5 wide receiver. Now, both of those situations seem prone to it as well, which again, it's not just that they converted positions, but it is interesting both of them are virtual positional converts before hitting that upside later in their careers. Most top 5 tight ends actually break out by year 2, to the tune of like 34 tight ends who have had top 5 seasons break out in year 2. Out of 46 or so since 2009. So yeah, that's a heavy group. And unlike wide receiver, who basically divides almost evenly, there's a slight edge towards second year breakouts for having top 12 seasons. But year 3 is almost as common as a breakout year for wide receivers. Whereas with tight ends, it's basically year 2 and then the slow trickle you get for the other positions of the Delaney Walkers and Darren Wallers. Something to that surname, I guess, as well, maybe. So Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry both profile interestingly. I have Hunter Henry in my top 12 for projections for 2021 currently, just because he's been able to accrue more volume to himself in a more potent offense with more competitive competition for targets as well before this time. He's mostly been held back by injury, which on the Chargers seems to be a pretty common feature. Actually, something about the medical staff, I speculate randomly, knowing no facts, and that's just allegedly, obviously. But Hunter Henry has done more to prove that he can, since neither are converting from the position, so we can actually use their stats to evaluate them as tight ends. Jonnu Smith, despite both of them actually being pretty interesting rookies with good size profiles and athletic profiles and really receiving profiles in college, Hunter Henry's been able to do it, and Jonnu Smith hasn't. The highest target share that Jonnu Smith has accrued is around 15%. The average target share for a tight end one at any team since 2009 is around 16%. So he's been underused, even just a tight end one on his team. Now, obviously, that includes a lot of, Ricky Seals-Joneses, who barely had 5%. So that's dragging the average down as well. And Jonnu Smith has had problem getting on the field as well, but overall, I think Hunter Henry has a more proven production profile. I do think New England really could force production through in the receiving game through tight ends, and it definitely seems to be something they have in mind if both players can stay healthy and develop that ability to grow volume for themselves. So they make it interesting, especially best ball prospects going into 2021. Don't think either look like Darren Waller, Delaney Walker of the world, and if I were to place my money on one of them, it would be Hunter Henry, despite thinking Jonnu Smith is a pretty decent prospect for it as well. Some other prospects I wanted to point it out, because I've been playing some best ball drafts, and I recently wrote up Mark Andrews for Player Profiler's Draft Kit. One of the best indicators of tight ends having those great or elite level ceilings is having a top 5 season before obviously their second year or in their second year. And there are actually some tight ends that seem to be falling because we're really interested in the new this year for tight end, which is absolutely the worst position to try and play that in, by the way. The old, as Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski and Austin Hooper had a 19% target share on offense. That was definitely not the ideal situation for him. Indicates like good players just continue to accrue volume. It's weird. It's almost like those two things are connected, but yeah, these are some names sticking out to me right now, if I can just move my fat old face over here. Austin Hooper, yeah, if you're thinking Cleveland can improve their offense next year, and I do think there's some hope of that. Again, he was tight end 21 last year. He wasn't even able to do what Jonnu Smith did a couple of years ago with a 21% target share and finishing in the top 9, I think it was. But he did maintain his ability to accrue volume. So there is some deep hope there. Again, just where I just continue to bet on older tight ends who have proven they can accrue some level of volume and provide fantasy relevance. Not in terms of I think he has his top 5 ceiling again, but just he's going to have usable weeks if that offense can get its act together in 2021 a little bit further than it did in 2020. So I don't hate him as a deeper prospect, and he's easily the cheapest one on this list. Mark Andrews, I know the Baltimore Ravens offense is topic of a lot of speculation right now, but I just want to point out that Mark Andrews has 2 top 6 seasons. The last 2 years he's played, he has that top 5 season breakout in his second year. He's done it mainly through touchdowns because there's a lack of volume going around in Baltimore, which again is a topic of conversation. But like tight end's much more about touchdowns than even wide receiver or running back, because it is such a lower volume position. Like Travis Kelce's, Rob Gronkowski's, and Jimmy Graham's of the world are rare for a reason, because they accrue volume and production and touchdowns, whereas much more of those usable tight ends week to week come from that ability to produce touchdowns. And Mark Andrews has proved successfully 2 years in a row that he's capable of doing that. And I think the Baltimore offense still projects to be an effective offense, even if it's a limited volume offense, which is probably the best assumption, although I hope it's not true, because I love a lot of those wide receivers. But still, Mark Andrews projects to still accrue enough volume on a limited offense and has that touchdown ceiling week to week. It's not that anyone's undervaluing Mark Andrews. I just think he's somewhat cheaper than he should be in the year of the new at tight end. I'll take the very young, already productive touchdown creator. TJ Hawkinson, like Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson are 2 of the best prospects of having great careers that continue to be liked, but they're not the hotness of at least my Dynasty bubble. And so I just wanted to throw his name out there. Like, of the two, TJ Hawkinson's the one who hit that top 5 category in year 2, and I think that's somewhat undernoted. Evan Ingram's a little bit weird because he broke out in year 1, and despite accruing the same amount of volume, has struggled to find the touchdowns, but that's very much a New York Giants receiving game, Daniel Jones-esque problem. But especially as cheap as he's going in best balls, I'm ending up just getting a lot of them. The opportunity has continued to be there in terms of the overall percentage of the offense and his positional opportunity that he's getting, or even the team opportunity level. So maybe he can bounce back and regress for touchdowns. I don't hate it at all. Same reason everyone seems to think Zach Ertz no longer exists or doesn't exist on the Philadelphia depth charts. And I think if that team really got its act together, it would funnel through both Gronkowski, through Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. I have doubts the team will be able to figure that out at this point. It's been a while since I've seen them do something good. But again, Zach Ertz is just that oldness that's probably continued going to produce relevant productions, at least as part of a streamable core. And so, again, especially in those best balls, I kind of still like Zach Ertz. Noah Fant, again, just throwing his name out because Hawkinson and Fant should be the hotness of the position, and they're not. So just a reminder, like, they're both having really good careers so far, and there's no reason to fade them. In the same way, Mike Gesicki's had 2 top 12 seasons in a row. Again, last year I said that he was more predictably in the top 12 in 2020 because he'd been in the top 12 in 2019, and he did it again, and still were like, Interestingly enough, of the 17 tight ends that broke out for 2 top 12 seasons or more, which Mike Gesicki is now part of, around 64% of them stopped there, which is actually about half or twice the number that no longer produce fantasy relevant seasons as wide receiver and running back. Like, having 2 top 12 seasons is kind of the ceiling of the good hits at tight end, unlike running backs and wide receivers who tend to be able to pick up that 3rd and 4th season. It doesn't mean I'm out on Mike Gesicki. I definitely think there's value in that offense, but like, Mike Gesicki hasn't proved himself to be exceptionally talented. His volumes, I think if the offense and the situation, again, where they're situation prone, does improve with the addition of Will Fuller and Tua not being bad, I don't know why that's a thing, but Mike Gesicki does have some upside for like incredibly cheap right now. And then there's Hunter Henry and Jonas Smith, as already talked about. This is normally the time of year I'm talking about last year's tight ends, so I wanted to point those guys out to you. I'm normally buying tight ends in year 2 because they maintain value. They relatively rarely increase in value, even when they break out in the top 5, like Evan Ingram, actually. Last year's crop was somewhat underwhelming, even as prospects. But a few of them accrued interesting volume behind lead players, such as Harrison Bryant and Albert O. I'm just going to call him Albert O. Adam Trotman, Cole Kmet also did as well. Neither are having great starts to their season, but we really didn't expect it anyway. And especially given the, not disappointing, actually somewhat impressive, considering where they were drafted to, crop from last year, I'm much more interested in these kind of players going into 2021. So yeah, those are just some players I'm adding some shares of, especially in best balls, but if I'm sending out offers and trying to, if my tight end position is weak, and trying to improve it with these falling value players or players that have never really accrued enough value to meet what they've actually managed to do in the NFL so far. And yeah, I just thought I'd share those names with you. As a return to YouTube after taking about a week off. I have been creating other tabs in my NFL database. That's the other thing I've been up to, in order to profile and just verify the things that I generally think about tight ends. Should I talk about those? Yeah, probably not. Probably not. These look very boring, don't they? But yeah. Yeah. Those are my... Tight ends really easy if you just cut the top off the hype and be like, yeah, I'm going to get usable weeks out of these guys for very, very cheap. And some of them may well have that upside next year because they're much more situational and touchdown prone than we typically hear. It's how I got to Zach Ertz before he hit that 3-year streak of being a top tight end. It's how I got Austin Hooper those 2 years where he's a top 6 tight end. Like, that's the ultimate upside, but mostly what I get is Mike Gesicki, and he's usable in the way a streamable tight end is. But considering the price I got Mike Gesicki for, and you can get him for this year as well if you want, or any of these guys. Well, not the Hawkinson fan. They're actually well valued, but just somewhat underhyped, I think. Yeah, it's just, tight end has been easy ever since I just accepted that it's not different wide receiver. It's in fact tight end. It's an entirely separate position. So yeah, that's where my hat's at. And this is a terrible return. Terrible return to YouTube. I apologize. But yeah. Content. I don't know. Let me know if there's another position or something you want to hear about as I'm ramping up my projections this week, and hopefully we'll have the first at least run of them out by the end of this week, up there on Patreon at least. And I'll try and make videos on it, because it's back to the grind. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time. Bye.